All right, this is the ISUPK Wednesday law class. Also, remember, check out Commanding General Johanna's radio show, which is 2 a.m. UK time. We also have classes here Monday through Friday. We have them in the school, 394 Lodge Road, B18, 5PW. We have the history class on Monday, the Brotherhood class on Tuesday, the law class on Wednesday, the scripture breakdown on Thursday. That's all from 394 Lodge Road, B18, 5PW. We also have the Lashawan Kodash on Friday, which is online, 7 p.m. till 9. We also have the online class. We also have On the Ends, which is Friday, 9 p.m. until 11. Saturday, we also have camp, if the weather permits, if the Lord allows. And yeah, we got tons of things. We got a full schedule. So we got a full schedule going on here. And today we're going to go into from slavery to the Windrush and all of those things. Let me see where I want to start. If I could, I'll get me Deuteronomy chapter 32 and verse 7. Also, any questions, just type them in the chat and we'll get to them. So we're going to go into a few things today.
This is Deuteronomy chapter 32 and verse 7. Remember the days of old.
So the Bible says, remember the days of old. Because if you don't remember the days of old, you don't know if you're repeating the same cycle numerous times. So we need to remember how these people have treated us for many years. We need to remember how they treated us in the past and how they still treat us today. Throughout all our generations, these oppressors have treated us horribly throughout every generation, man. Throughout all of our generations, these oppressors have treated the children of God horribly. And we're going to get into some first-hand accounts also, man. We're going to get into some first-hand accounts of people who came to England and what their story was. We're also going to go into probably a bit of history, all of those kind of things. Bit of history, bit of about the Windrush, about how when they came to England, why they came to England, what was their idea of England before they came, what was their idea of England once they came here, all of those kind of things. So if you got any questions, just type them in and we'll get to them. But so I can read it again.
Remember the days of old.
It says, remember the days of old. It says, remember the days of old. Meaning, remember what happened in the past, man.
That's right.
And we need to remember this, why? So we know who to stay away from in the future. Right. If you don't know who harmed you in the past, you're going to be around the same people and they're going to harm you in the future. Whereas if you remember from the past, you know, all right, then I'm going to stay away from these people. Why? Because they're harmful to my health. Right. They're harmful to my life. And these nation of people have harmed us and have hurt us and have done all sorts of stuff to us. People are always saying, all you like do is read the Bible and talk about oppression. Well, we're going to show you some oppression from sources outside of the Bible. We're going to show you what they've been doing to us from people listen, we can read records that have nothing to do with religion, man. We can read non-secular books, man. We can read non-secular books and show you that this man is the devil even outside of a belief system, man, based on just his nature and what he does to people. We can show you this from non-secular sources, man. Because you people say, all you like do is read the Bible. We can show you from other sources as well. Life should show you this, man. Everyday life should show you that this man is the devil, man. So okay, read on.
Consider the years of many generations.
Consider the years of many generations, man. If you're still blessed to have your grandparents around and all of those things, you ask them about how life was in their days, man. Document it. Ask them how life was like for them. If they're from England or whatever, or no matter where they're from, you ask them what life was like for them, how they was treated, how do they think things has changed? Has racism stopped? Do they believe racism's ended? Was racism worse before or is it worse now? These are the questions that you need to ask. We need to ask all of those questions. And ask those questions from who? Your grandparents, man. Because after their generation, all you got is what? Records, man. So if you can ask them firsthand about their life, even have a video, man, even record them speaking about it. So 100 years time from now, these children can actually speak to someone who lived through the Windrush, who actually lived through what this devil does, and then they can compare it with how they're living, and they'll see the same oppression our grandparents was going through, the same ones that we're going through. We show that they ain't never been changed, man. We show that they ain't never changed. They might have took on new forms of religion, but they still don't change, man. Read any more on that?
Come on.
Go ahead.
Ask thy father,
Ask your fathers, man. Go ahead.
and he will shew thee.
And he will show you, man. Say, Pops, who's the devil, man? And he will show you, man. Say, who enslaved us, man? And he will show you. Because no one can't deny who the people that's enslaved us. That's etched in history, man. Now, some of the things we say, you want to try and refute it. There's some things you can't refute, man. So, like, go ahead.
Thy elders and they will tell thee.
Ask them and they will tell thee, man. Ask them and they will show thee and they will tell thee. So now, let's start off with, give me Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 68. So now we're going to go to Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 68, which is the famous slave ship scripture. And then we'll go into records. Hold on. Go ahead.
Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 68. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships.
And it says, the Lord shall bring thee into bondage again with ships. It says that you're going to go into bondage again with ships. Hold on, give me 1 second. Okay, let me see which part I want. Hold on, give me 1 second. All right, hold on. All right, so now read that one more time.
And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships.
And it says, and the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships, talking about slavery. Now, on those slave ships, a lot of things happened on those slave ships. People think, okay, they just went on a ship and landed at their destination. There was a lot of death. There was a lot of people thrown overboard. There was a lot of sickness. There was a lot of torture. People shackled and squashed together. People getting half a spoon of water a day. That's what they was drinking. Half a spoon of water a day was their meal, man. That's what they was getting. So now this is a book. Now we read about slavery. This is a book called The Zong. So now it says there were now an estimated 380 Africans on board. Now, obviously, we know those were Israelites, but obviously they can't say they can't say that these were Jews. Why? Because if they say that these are Jews, you're going to be then asking, well, who's the Jewish man? So they had to scatter us so far and wide and lie to us about who we are and tell us we are another dark race. Why? So then our nationality is free for someone else to claim it. So they've done all that and allowed someone else to claim our nationality freely. Why? Because we lost all our history and our records because we were scattered and persecuted. And then obviously we became African according to them. According to them, we became African. So now, there were now an estimated 380 Africans on board, many of whom were sick. So these were sick. Why? Because obviously they ain't getting the right nutrition that they're supposed to be getting. They're shackled. They're on a ship for a long duration of time. No exercise, no nothing. They're stressed, scared, hot, cold, confused, all of those kind of things. It says many of them were sick. So it says there were now an estimated 380 Africans on board. Like I said, those are Israelites, many of whom were sick. It was at this point on any slave voyage, only days from landing, that the ship's doctor and crew were usually busy preparing Africans for sail. Like I said, they were Israelites. So now there's a few days away from landing, and the doctors was doing what? Preparing the slaves for sail. These doctors was involved in slavery too, man. You do know slavery was more than just one man kidnapping a few people. Nah, man, it was a business. You had a doctor, you had the ship crew, you had navigators, you had people that knew how to read, how to navigate ships, all of those kind of things. This was a business, man. They had people that could navigate ships. They had doctors on board. They had all types of people on board, man. It was a business. The doctor would do what? Make sure the people don't die, because why? They want money. The ship would do what? Make sure the people get to their destination. Why? Because they want money. It was a business, man. This wasn't just something where one day a random Edomite woke up and said, you know what? Let's go look for some slaves. This was organized crime, man. They was an organization. They was an organization. There was a thing that they called the Royal African Commission, man, where what? They had different bases set up, and the Africans would do what? Go capture the Israelites and sell them to the Europeans, man. But obviously, certain history books will tell you it was Africans selling Africans. The reason they say that, why? Because they need to hide the fact that you're a Jew. They need to hide the fact that you're an Israelite. Don't let nobody tell you that, oh, everybody in West Africa is an Israelite. That's a lie, man. Them West Africans was selling the Israelites, man. All them tribes was selling the Israelites. The Mandingos and all of those people was selling the Israelites, man. And because they took them from that region, our people are so lost, they believe that they're those people. So they've even fell for the lie that Africans were selling Africans. Africans were selling Israelites, man.
That's right.
You can't be from the tribe of Mandingo and the Israelite. It's two different tribes, man.
Right.
You're from one or the other. Either you're an Israelite or you're a Hamite, man.
Right.
There's no such thing. I'm from this African tribe. I'm from the Igbo tribe. I'm from the Yoruba tribe. You do know these tribes that you claim to be is dwelling in Africa and as rich as could be, man. These Africans sold you, man. They sold you to the Caribbeans and all these places, and they got rich off it. And then the reason why the Africans are so mad right now is why? Because there was this thing called the Berlin Conference, which happened in the 1800s after slavery was abolished. All these European nations, the seven-headed dragon in Revelation, all them nations sat down at a table, and what did they do? They discussed how they was going to carve up Africa. That's why tons of African countries speak French. Tons of African countries speak Italian. Tons of African countries speak English. Why? Because when they carved it up, the countries that England took, they colonized it. They began speaking English. The ones the French took started speaking French. And that's why Africans try and make out like they're the same people as us. That's why they try and say, yeah, because we hate them because they came and ruined Africa. They didn't care about Africa being ruined when they were selling God's people, man. When they was selling the Israelites, capturing them and selling them and putting them on slave ships, selling them for handkerchiefs, the Africans didn't care then, man. It was no problem. But as soon as they realized nobody can trust this devil, and he went and carved up Africa and said, all right, I'm colonizing this part, I'm taking this part. That's when they had a problem with it. And all these nations do this, man. When the oppressor only oppresses us, nobody cares. But then once it starts to oppress them, they try and get us to join with them. Because, yeah, you see what it did to you, and you see what it's doing to us. Whereas in the beginning, when they was just oppressing blacks and Hispanics, there was no us involved. The Africans never used to lump themselves in the us. Only once it started oppressing them, they try and get us to join them. Let me read on. So it says, only days from landing that the ship's doctor and crew were usually busy preparing Africans for sale. Like I said, this was Israelites. Washing and cleaning the captives, oiling their skin to give it a less sickly pallor. The most wretched afflicted with dysentery were bunged up with oakum and cotton. So now, dysentery is like brothers suffering from that had a bad case of diarrhea. When they was about to be sold, what did the oppressor do? He plugged their behind with oakum and cotton, man. So the buyers would think, okay, this slave's not sick. They'd oil them up. You see, like when you sell a car, you wash it, you buff it, you make the car look fresh. They done that with the slaves. Why? Because they wanted maximum money. Because they know the buyer would have looked at the slave and said, this one ain't worth what he's trying to sell him for. Because he's sick, he's got dysentery and all of them things. They said, we out. So now, they oiled them up, cleaned them up to make the slaves look more presentable. Says that the Africans had to be scrubbed and smartened, and the blemishes of sickness and trauma disguised to make them as attractive and valuable as possible to would-be purchasers. So to them, you was just a salesman. Says the crew, now numbering only 11 men, were assembled and asked what they thought of the suggestion. No, hold on, let's read the rest. Says these last days in the Zong, however, took a very different direction. on the 29th of November with the Zong still far to the west of Jamaica. So now the sailor that was sailing this ship, he was meant to be sailing for Jamaica, but obviously he missed his destination and he went past Jamaica. So they said there was running out of food on the ship. They said on the ship we're running out of food. So then they had to make decisions. What are we going to do? We got all these people to feed and we've gone past our destination. We're not going to make it for a few days, or it's going to take us a while because we've gone way past it. So it says, the Zong still far to the west of Jamaica. The crew, now numbering only 11 men, were assembled and asked what they thought of the suggestion that faced with the water crisis. Part of the slaves should be destroyed to save the rest, and the remainder of the slaves and the crew put to short allowance. So they said, all right, we got a short amount of water. We need to destroy part of the slaves, man. They said, we need to destroy part of the slaves. So we're going to see how they destroyed them. Says James Kelso later claimed that he was shocked and objected when he first heard the proposal. If that is true, his objections quickly subsided. The crew agreed to the proposal unanimously. So they all came and said, all right, then we're going to have to destroy some of these slaves because we don't have enough water. So it says, no one on board objected to the suggestion that they kill some of the slaves, and they set about the murderous work immediately at 8 p.m. So that same evening, 54 women and children were pushed overboard. So they started throwing these Israelites off the ship, man. They pushed them overboard. Why? Because they was running out of water. They were still shackled when they pushed them overboard. They didn't even push them overboard and say, if you can swim to safety, try it. They didn't even do that. They left them shackled and said, you know what? You're better off dying. They pushed them overboard, man. They seen it as, you know what? We ain't got enough water, so these are useless. Let's just kill them. They pushed them overboard. Let's read on. As Kausa later described, singly through the cabin windows, the timing was important, darkness was falling, and the change in the ship's watch allowed all hands to be available for the killings. Says 2 days later, on the 1st of December, a group of 42 men were thrown overboard from the quarterdeck. So they threw these men overboard from the quarterdeck. Hold on, let me see if I can get you a picture of someone being thrown over deck. Hold on. So you can get a visual of what was going on. Imagine being a slave shackled and you're seeing your loved ones getting thrown overboard. You're just seeing them getting thrown overboard to the sharks and whatever's in the water. Just think, look at this picture right here. So now, let's read that again. So, all right, the Zong was the name of the slave ship. And they drove past their location because they was meant to stop at Jamaica. They went past their location, the guy that was navigating the ship. So they said they didn't have enough water on board for everybody. So they all had a council and said, what are we going to do about this? And now we're going to read what they came up to. It says, no one on board objected to the suggestion that they kill some of the slaves, and they set about the murderous work immediately at 8 p.m. That same evening, 54 women and children were pushed overboard. So they killed women and children. They threw 54 women and children overboard. Imagine being a slave, being shackled, and you're seeing your loved ones getting thrown overboard. You're seeing your children getting thrown overboard. You're seeing your father getting thrown overboard. Listen, man, these people is the devil the Bible speaks of, man.
That's right.
Look at how they're throwing children overboard. And then in 2023, you want to tell me God loves everybody in John 3:16? Don't give me that garbage, man. You need to read some of these history books. Just look at this picture right there. This is someone being thrown overboard. So now let's read some more of the book. It says, the timing was important, darkness was falling, and the change in the ship watch allowed all hands to be available for the killing. 2 days later, on the 1st of December, a group of 42 men were thrown overboard from the quarterdeck. So the 42 men overboard. It says a third batch of 38 Africans were killed, Now, obviously, we know these were Israelites, but obviously they're going to say African in the book, but we know these were God's chosen people, the Israelites. It says a third batch of 38 were killed sometime later. Then it says 10 Africans, realizing what was about to happen, jumped overboard to their deaths. Somehow, one of them managed to clamber back on board. Like I said, these wasn't Africans, they were Israelites because they came from West Africa. I was sold from West Africa. The world caused them that because they want to hide the fact that these is Jews and God's chosen people. Let's read on. It says, the killings took place in small, manageable batches. The men were thrown overboard, handcuffed, and in irons. Imagine they couldn't even have the decency to unhandcuff them and say, you know what, if you can swim to safety, do it. They didn't even give them the option. They threw them overboard while they were still in handcuffs and irons, man. Didn't even give them the chance of survival. Just threw them overboard in handcuffs and irons. It says, according to Kersal, to make the process less dangerous for the vigilant crew, it was obvious to the other Africans penned below deck what was happening. They must have heard the killings. It was no easy matter to heave a human being overboard. Even when they were shackled, Robert Stubbs, innocently marginal to those events in his evidence, later told the court, I heard some of the shrieks of some of them. People tend to not go to a violent death without a noisy struggle. And though the evidence about the last brutal moments of the murdered Africans, like I said, there was Israelites, is sparse, we know enough and can easily imagine more about the screaming terror unleashed in the waters around the Zong. So they killed all these blacks and Hispanics, man, threw them overboard, and they died and drowned. And you're telling me I should care about 5 people that died on a submarine, that went on a submarine freely, that went on a submarine by choice? Listen, man, them dying in the waters was a choice. Our one wasn't a choice, man. We was thrown overboard, man. And this is the history that we're reading. Read that scripture one more time. Read Deuteronomy 28 and 68 again one more time.
Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 68. And the Lord shall bring thee into Egypt again with ships.
So now, when we was on them slave ships, this is what was taking part on them slave ships, man. This is what was happening.
Right.
People were being thrown overboard to their death.
That's right.
And there was screams and shrieks because it was a violent death. Drowning is a violent death. And this is the way they treated God's chosen people, man.
That's right.
And you wonder why. When Jesus Christ returns, blood has to be shed, man.
Right.
You wonder why. The blood of the saints cries day and night, man. The black people that was killed unjustly, man, they're never going to be forgotten, man. And you forget them once you join Christianity, man.
That's right.
Once you become a Christian, you forget all the suffering of your people.
Right.
You forget everything that happened to God's chosen people once you become a Christian and tell that lie that everybody can be saved. Saved from what, man? Black people needed saving from this, man. Black people needed saving from being thrown overboard of ships.
Right.
And who was throwing them overboard? The oppressor, man. He can't be saved because he's the person we need saving from.
That's right.
He's the person we need saving from.
Right.
And until then, we're going to keep dying, man. Until we get right, man, and change our life. Let me read some more about the screaming terror unleashed in the waters around the Zong. On those early evenings, only days short of Jamaica, this terrible scene, repeated over 3 days, killed 1/3 of the Africans on board. Now, these were Israelites, but 1/3 died by drowning, man. 1/3 was thrown overboard and had a horrible death. 1/3 drowned to death, man, because of the oppressor. The murder of the last group of Africans in early December did not end this catalogue of African deaths on the Zong. As the ship struggled on with the diminished water supplies, though now with fewer African thirsts to quench, it was claimed that a further 36 Africans died before reaching Jamaica. These were Israelites. I have to keep reiterating it because people think it's talking about Africans, but no, these were Israelites. So now, 36 more died before reaching Jamaica. Stubbs said that the Zong arrived at Black River with 30 of the Negroes laying dead upon the deck from famine, man. Imagine that. 30 of God's people was found dead lying upon the deck, who died of famine, man. Died of thirst and hunger. Let's read some more. The Zong arrived at Black River with 208 Africans on board on the 9th of January, 1782. A Jamaican newspaper ran an advertisement offering for sale 200 Africans from the Zong. These were the survivors of the 442 squeezed into the Zong. So now they had 442 on there, only 208 survived. So they started off with 442, 208 of them survived. That's one voyage. Says such a massive loss of life on any slave ship would have proved a commercial disaster for the owners. But when the Gregson Syndicate heard about the deaths, they had other ideas. They intended to turn the loss of life into a profitable trade by claiming on the ship's insurance for Africans murdered at sea. So now they had another idea. Imagine their ships was insured. So what did they do? They went to their insurers that insured these slaves and said, well, they died at sea, so you like need to pay us out. They said these slaves died at sea, so you need to pay us out. Hold on. Yeah, so they said they died at sea, so you like need to pay us out. And then this is how you only found out that what happened was unjust. You know why? Because what happened is the insurers said, you killed them yourself, we're not going to pay out. And they had to go to court over it. Why? Because they said it's a loss of cargo. One side said it's a loss of cargo. The other side said, well, you killed them, so we're not going to pay it out on our insurance. It's like you crashing your car yourself and expecting the insurance to pay out. They don't pay out under certain circumstances. And these insurers didn't want to pay out. Not that they cared about the slaves. They just didn't want to pay out because they're thinking, we don't want to give you money. So then once people found out what happened, this made the news. And the people seen how inhumane it was and how disgusting it was. Now, if they never claimed on the ship's insurance, nobody would have ever cared. But because the insurance wanted to make out how vile these people are, how they killed people, and how they want money back, what they done is let it be known, look, you killed them yourself, you drowned them, we're not going to pay out. Hold on, let me see if I can find some more. Let me just quickly read this part before I jump off it. It says, in the early days of the slave trade, Europeans were divided about how much water to give to Africans on the slave ships. Some ships' doctors had been reluctant to give Africans more than a few regular spoonfuls. Like I said, the Israelites says those are reluctant to give them more than a few regular spoonfuls of water from the belief that too much water caused diarrhea. So now imagine this, you're on this ship and you're only getting a few spoons of water, man. Hold on, let me find something else that I want. Yeah. So now let me read this part. So now there was a slave ship which they called the Black Joke, and it was a French slave ship. Now the British, they seized this slave ship from the French, and then later the French seized the slave ship back. But when the French seized it back, they was already slaves on the ship. So let's read it. It says Robert Stubbs has been master of the Black Joke, one of the most ironically named of all slave vessels, and surely no accident. Seized from the French, this 100-ton ship had sailed from London to the Gambia in 1757 under Stubbs' command and had taken on board 230 Africans. Like I said, there was Israelites. But the Black Joke was again seized, repossessed by the French. The surviving Africans were delivered not to a British colony, but to the French island of Martinique. So now, some of the brothers who's in Martinique today, whose family members were carried to Martinique, originally they were supposed to be carried to the Jamaica. But because the French seized the ship, tons of them brothers was carried to Martinique. Whereas you would think, now imagine being a slave, you'd think, okay, the English have got me shackled down and the French have come and seized the ship. You'd think they've come to save us. They didn't come to save you, man. They did the same thing as the British. They just took you to another colony. They took you to Martinique, man. So you would have thought, okay, freedom's coming. You just went from one slave master to another slave master. The brothers in the Caribbean, well, the brothers in Jamaica, Trinidad, Martinique, Guadeloupe, all over America, we all have the same oppressor, man. And they all have the same thing in mind. Let's read on. Says were delivered not to a British colony but to the French island of Martinique. Says despite the failure, Stubb maintained his interest in the slave trade, subsequently becoming part owner of another slave ship and finding employment throughout the 1770s as a shipbroker in London. In that time, he developed good relations with the Company of Merchants trading into Africa, formerly the Royal African Company. And in 1780, he was appointed governor of Anamabu, one of their smaller trading forts on the Gold Coast. It was to prove a disastrous appointment. The Royal African Company had once been the face of British slave trading on the coast. Hold on. Now, let's read some more. It says, little thought was spared for the Africans. All sides shared a broadly based consensus that the African was a commodity, an item of trade, something to be bought, sold, haggled over, and used. It was this core belief which was to be a central but particularly lethal issue on the Zong in 1781. No one doubted the indispensability of the African, and most sides were united in the view that without African labor, like I said, there were Israelites, says without African labor, the American plantations could not function. Without the plantations and all that flowed into and out of them, British economic well-being at home and abroad would falter. Listen, man. They even said their colonies couldn't function without the slaves, man. They said their colonies couldn't function without the slaves, man. Hold on, let me see what else I want. I think I might be done with this book. Hold on, let me see. Hold on, let me see. All right, we can drop that for now. Hold on, let me just remove. All right. Yeah, Baraki, that's right, man. We went from an English devil to a French devil, and this should let us know they're all the same. Now, imagine being on a slave ship. You'd think I'm going from. You'd think, you know what? The French is here to rescue me. You'd think, damn, the British is so horrible and violent. It can't get any worse than this. The British is coming to rescue me. No, I mean the French is coming to rescue me. And then what happened? The French ended up taking you into slavery in Martinique, man. Imagine being in the Caribbean early and you're slaves to the Spanish, and then you see the British come. You're going to think, damn, the British is coming to rescue me. The British came so they could enslave you too, man. So like, I'll put this book in front of, this is the book that we're reading from. So yeah, it's a good book about the slave ship where they drowned or where they drowned tons of God's chosen people. It's called the Zong. It says a massacre, the law, and the end of slavery. All right, drop that quote as well. Get me. Hold on, let me get a next book actually. Give me 1 second. Hold on. All right, give me page. Yeah, take this as well. This is page 150. This is page 157 in a book called The History of Jamaica. So now on them slave ships, there was a thing called the triangular route. Hold on, let me see if we can pull it up. Let's see if it breaks. Let me see if it goes into the triangular route. Yeah, the triangular. So it's a route where what? Hold on. So now obviously in slavery, it was like a triangular route. So the triangular route is what that. Let's say they would go to Africa. They would take they would bring musket guns and handkerchiefs. Then they would take the brothers, put them on the slave ships, go to the Caribbean. They would put them off the slave ship. What they would do is then put all the cotton and the sugar that they got in the Caribbean, and then they would take it to Europe. They'd stop at the Liverpool dock. So it was a triangular route. They would go from Africa, bring slaves to the Caribbean, take them slaves off, and then what the previous slaves in the Caribbean had made, pick the sugar and stuff. They would load that on the ship, then they would bring it to Europe, and then that's how England became so rich because of this obviously triangular route. It was get slaves, drop them to the Caribbean, what them Caribbeans picked, put that on the slave ship, go to Europe. So they used to do a circle in like a triangle. So they would go from Africa to the Caribbean to Europe, back to Africa, the Caribbean, to Europe. And each time they would go to Africa, what would they do? Bring more slaves, drop them off. When they would go back to the Caribbean, what would they do? Pick up more sugar. When they would go back to Europe, what would they do? Drop off more wealth. And they kept doing that. And that's how England became so rich. That's how England became one of the richest countries on the face of the earth. Why? Because of slavery, man. It said without the sugar trade from the Caribbean, England wouldn't be nothing, man. So now let's see what the triangular route on Wikipedia says. It says triangular trade. All right, so now you can see that. Hold on, let me see if we can share it on the thing. Oh, so lucky I took it off. I was meant to put it on. Hold on. So now this is the triangular trade. So this is how it would have looked. It would have looked like this. So you see this. Hold on, let me go in there so you can see the cursor. So now what you would see is sugar, tobacco, and cotton to Europe. So now here is they would bring all of this to Europe. So now then they'll go Africa here. So all right, they would start here, Africa, textiles and manufactured goods to Africa. So they would give the Africans cups, glasses, handkerchiefs, and in exchange they would give slaves, which lets you know how much an African cared about your life. You're out there saying you're African. African prefer the handkerchief to you, something you blow your nose with or wipe your forehead with. They've seen that was more beneficial to them than you was. You're saying, Africa, one love. Africans don't love you, man. Or they wouldn't have ever done this. So now the Europeans would come here with their slave ship, textiles, manufactured goods to Africa. So then they would give them those things in exchange for you. Then slaves to the Americas. So they'll take you to North America and South America. They'll take you throughout North America and South America. The Caribbean is what? North America, right? The Caribbean is in North America. So now it all comes under it. So now they'll take you all over there. Then from there, they would load it up. They would load up their ship with the sugar, tobacco, and the cotton. Then they would go right here, up here, back to Europe. So they would usually go to the Liverpool docks. Hold on one second. So now that's what they would do. So this was the triangular route. The triangular route worked like that. They'll take all of this back to Europe, and that's how Europe became so rich. Because obviously, off of the work that you did. So imagine the slaves is here. You're working over here, picking cotton, cane. You're doing all of those kind of things. You're working sun up to sundown, 16 hours, sleeping in a little shack, getting no days off. And then you're producing tobacco, sugar, cotton, all of those kind of things. You're producing all of those kind of things. And then a man would just come and take it all to Europe. And then off of that, that's how they set up everything they have in England, man. That's how they built all their buildings. That's how they able to give you a loan from the bank, because they had all that money that came from your labor. So now you go to them and go to them for a loan, and what do? 9% APR on every loan we give you. That's how they do it. So that's the triangular route. Hold on, let me scroll down and see if it says anything more. That's a depiction of a classical model of the triangle route. So now here it says rum and goods to Africa, slaves to the Americas, sugar to New England. So this is a depiction of the triangular route as well. Hold on one sec. Let me go back to Wikipedia. commodities that are not required in the region from blah, 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 blah. So it says the Atlantic slave trade used a system of freeway transatlantic exchanges known historically as the triangular trade, which operated between Europe, Africa, and the Americas from the 16th to the 19th centuries. A classic example is the colonial molasses trade, which involved the circuitous trading of slave sugar, often in liquid form as molasses, and rum between West Africa, the West Indies, and the northern colonies of British North America. It says the slaves grew the sugar that was used to brew rum, which in turn was traded for more slaves. In this circuit, the sea lane west from Africa to West Indies and later also to Brazil was known as the Middle Passage. Its cargo consisted of abducted or recently purchased African people. Like I said, we know the Israelites. The countries that controlled the transatlantic slave market until the 18th century, in terms of the number of enslaved people shipped, were the United Kingdom, Portugal, and France. And these nations is Edomite countries. And what you'll find is these three countries right here is part of the seven-headed dragon in the book of Revelations, man. That dragon that took down a third of the stars, man. And this is how they done it, man. With slavery, with oppression, with beating and abusing us. They done it that way, man. When it says his tail drew a third of the stars out of heaven, man. They came and conquered us, man. And took us from our high position to a low position, man. They took us from heaven and brought us down to earth, brought us down to a disgusting low state that we still, until this day, once their tail drew a third of the stars out of heaven. Read on. Hold on. Actually, that's all I need on that. So, like, read what you're holding for me quite as well.
This page.
Also, any questions, just type them in and we'll get to them. So, like, you go ahead.
Page 157, Sugar and Slaves. The English soon involved in the trade, the terrible John Hawkins set the trend in 1562, getting rich by selling 300 Africans in Hispaniola. But the French and the Portuguese were already quite active in 1564.
So now what you'll find is with the slave trade, Britain didn't get involved in the slave trade till later on. Britain was one of the last ones to get involved in the slave trade because in the beginning they just didn't see it as beneficial. They got involved with it last once they realized how much money can be made. They realized how much money can be made. So they got involved in it. And once Britain got involved in it, they took the thing to a whole nother level. So, Lucky, go ahead.
While the English were slow to imitate them.
So now the English were slow to imitate them, meaning they were slow to get involved. Go ahead.
James I granted an exclusive charter to a few Londoner merchants.
Go ahead.
In 1618.
Now, this is talking about King James. Now, what you'll find is King James wasn't in the truth. So people say, oh, King James had merchants that done this and that. King James wasn't in the truth. What you'll find is back then it was about what? Conquering lands. It wasn't about race. It was about conquering lands. But now, King James sent granted those men to do a mission. He didn't send them to go rape nobody. The British was over there raping Pocahontas and all of those kind of things. That wasn't part of the plan. And these devils always do their own thing. Like today, the British Army is supposed to do what? Go and do what they're supposed to do. But what the British Army do today, they're in Iran and Iraq raping those women, man. Whereas in their contracts, they ain't supposed to be raping nobody, man. But they see them as subhuman and they rape them. And that's what they're doing. So, Lucky, go ahead.
But the Royal African Company did not see the light before 1672.
Go ahead. And by this time, King James was already long dead. Go ahead.
It enjoyed it.
So even before England started even enslaving people like that, King James was already dead. Go ahead. You know when Great Britain got most of its colonies? Once Queen Victoria was sitting on the throne. Queen Victoria was a white woman. Obviously, after the Jacobites got kicked off the throne and got banished from England and started getting shipped from the UK back to the Caribbean. They was getting shipped from the UK back to the Caribbean. So not every brother came on slave ships from Africa. Some went from Europe because why? We was ruling Europe during the Dark Ages. Now, at the end of the Dark Ages, during the Renaissance period, once you had what are those people called when they set up the banks in Italy? The Medici or whatever they called, was a family that set up banking. They started to paint all the images white, and that was the beginning of whitewashing in the Renaissance period. people's getting shipped from Europe, from England, Ireland, Scotland, all over Europe, back to the Caribbean. Why? Because we was ruling Europe at one stage. So there was a ton of us over here already until Oliver Cromwell beheaded Charles I. After that, that was basically the end for us. After that, black people started to be kicked out of Europe. So, Lucky, go ahead.
It enjoyed exclusivity until 1688.
Go ahead.
The following year, the English and the Spaniards.
Look, I'll back it, them two, but I can't. There was a family that set up the bank. Hold on, let me find their name. There was a family that set up the bank, a big family who basically started the whole thing in Italy. Let me find the name. Hold on. Yeah, that's the name. The House of the House of the Medici. Hold on. The House of the Medici. Let me pull it up real quick. Obviously, when it comes to the Dark Ages and whatnot, or the Renaissance period, it's good to know about the House of the Medici. Hold on. Obviously, they started off as some low levels and made it to the top. Hold on. I believe the Medici is the ones who even paid for certain the Sistine Chapel and all of those things to be painted and all of those kind of things. I'm sure they had a hand in all of those kind of things. Hold on. You know, one day I need to do a whole class in the House of the Medici. I'll drop it for now. Before I go off topic. Yeah, that's the one, bro. The Medici family. So Lucky, got read what you're reading, Quazo.
The following year, the English and the Spaniards agreed upon commercial terms, which turned the former into the most active slave traders in the world.
They became the most active slave traders in the world. Go ahead.
Of course, many of these slaves were sent to Jamaica. So when you read about people being shipped abroad in the Bible and so forth, you should read this and see yourself in there and say, oh, well, damn, the Bible has to be my book because it talks about slave ships. And my people had on slave ship was on slave ships. Go ahead. In 1658, 3 years after the island was taken over from the Spaniards, there were 400 slaves and 4,000 colonists in Jamaica.
So now, back then, those 4,000 slaves. No, those wait, what was the number?
400 slaves.
There were 400 slaves
and 4,000 colonists.
There's 400 slaves and 4,000 colonists. And then you'll see over time the numbers doubled. You will see they became less oppressors and there was more slaves. Go ahead.
By 1775, there were 200,000 slaves.
There was 200 what?
200,000 slaves.
By 1775, there was 200,000 slaves. Go ahead.
And 8,000 colonists.
And 8,000 colonists. So there's 200,000 slaves. So don't let nobody tell you, oh, all the slaves were raped and you all got white blood and you could be white, this and that. Listen, man. There was how much colonists?
There was 200,000 slaves.
There's 200,000 slaves, man. Go ahead.
And 8,000 colonists.
You know why? Because them slave masters, half of them to have sex with a black person was like having sex with an animal. Half of them wouldn't do it. They looked at black people as the so low and so filthy that they wouldn't do it. So all of this stuff, when people tell you, oh, how do you know you're an Israelite? Because your ancestor could have been blah, 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 blah. That's just someone that wants an excuse not to serve God. That's all that is. That's just somebody who wants an excuse not to serve God. Because there was 200,000 slaves, man. And 8,000 colonizers. Go ahead. And even when you look in history, they used to have, I can't remember where it was. There was a brother, and what they done is, because he was tall and big and strong, it was his job. His job for the whole day it was just a job to have sex with women, to make stronger slaves. That's what they would do. They would have a black man. His job for the whole day was to have sex with so much women so that strongest, tall, big, strong slaves could be produced because it was a business. It's like breeding dogs. What do? You want your dogs to be full pedigree so they can be strong and all of those kind of things. The oppressor thought the same way. They had this brother, his whole job for the whole day was to have sex with women non-stop and make stronger slaves and stronger slaves and stronger slaves because they looked at him as strong and powerful and they wanted all the slaves to have his stature. Slack is the number on it.
Calm. The demographical reversal was due to a development of agriculture, which had transformed sugar canes into gold.
It transformed what?
Sugar canes into gold.
Listen, man. Sugarcane was transformed into gold, man. All that sugar that you was out there, that sugar cane you was chopping, all that cotton you was picking. Listen, man, you transferred it into gold. So, okay, go ahead. There's no more on there. There should be a next spot. Is there a next spot on there?
Not highlighted.
Press it. Let me see. There should be a part where it mentions. Hold on.
Next page.
Let me see. Hold on, it might be. Wait a minute. Let me see if it's this one. Give me 1 second. Let me see what I wanted. All right, let me see. Yeah, give me this one. Page 159. Go ahead. So now we're in the same book, page 159.
The Jamaican grain became more expensive than the one from Barbados.
So now the Jamaican grain became more expensive than the one in Barbados. Go ahead.
By 1670, there were more than 600 windmills in the island.
So now, go ahead. There was more than 600 windmills in the island. Go ahead.
And 10 times more in 1730.
Go ahead.
Jamaica now counted 430 plantations owned by rich planters.
Jamaica had 430 plantations owned by rich planters. Go ahead.
These planters became so powerful that the sugar colonies, as these islands came to be called, were the most valuable possession of any empire.
That was the most what?
Most valuable possession of any empire.
They said, read that part from the top one more time.
These planters became so powerful.
These planters became so powerful. These slave masters became so powerful. Go ahead.
That the sugar colonies.
That the sugar colonies, all that sugar that you was picking in the in the field, it made them powerful. It made them rich. It said this was the most valuable thing throughout every colony. That sugar that you was picking was valuable. Why? Because everybody wanted sugar, man. Everybody needed sugar. They was selling all this sugar that you was giving them for free. All this hard work, this free labor they was getting off you, they was getting money off it for free. These planters became rich and powerful off of the back of slavery, man. That's what that's saying right there. That's saying these planters became filthy rich off of the back of slavery. Read on.
As these islands came to be called, were the most valuable possessions of any empire, fiercely fought over in every war.
Fiercely what?
Fiercely fought over in every war.
And now it says because of these possessions that they had and the riches of the sugar, it says these things was fought over in every war. Every time these Edomite nations bump heads, it's about what? Over the slaves, man. Because one nation wants the slaves, the other one wants the slaves. One person wants the riches that the slaves bring, so does the other ones. They fight over us, and it's not to save us. They fight over us. Why? Because of all the money we bring to their empires, man. All the riches and wealth we bring to their empires. That's the only time they bump heads, man. Go ahead.
That broke out in Europe.
Says every war that broke out in Europe is over these things right here. Go ahead.
And as fiercely bargained for at every peace conference.
And fiercely bargained for at every peace conference. They used to have conferences, man. These nations used to have conferences about slavery, man. about their colonies, about which countries bringing, about which slave plantation brings what. So, Lucky, go ahead.
Says black. Their importance in the eyes of governments was out of all proportion to their size. Indeed, the British West Indians had more political influence with the government in England than did all 13 American mainland colonies.
Because obviously you do know America used to basically belong to England. England had 13 colonies in America. That 13 colonies in America. I believe they used it as a penal colony. It's a place where you send prisoners to. So they had 13 colonies. Some was used as a penal colony. And that's why in America you have places like New York. Because there's a York in England. New York was just an extension of the York in England, if you get what I mean. So they have all of those names over there because obviously it was settled by them. That's why you have Jamestown, which was named after who? King James. All of those kind of things. You have all of those places. That's why when you read the Bible, it says the little horn which came out of there's a little horn which came out of Great Britain. That little horn that came out of Great Britain is America. And they had 13 colonies in America before America fought for their freedom. Go ahead.
Their indignation at the favor shown to these islands was one of the grievances that led them to revolt against British rule and become an independent republic.
And they revolted against British rule, became an independent republic. Go ahead.
Thus, Jamaica, at first a mere consolation prize for the Western design, became the richest possession of the British in the New World.
Jamaica became the richest possession of the Britain in the New World, man. It became the richest possession because of all the slavery and that money that was getting pumped from the Caribbean into all these British colonies. They was pumping money out of the Caribbean and building up England. And that's why England looks so great today. Why? Because it's built on the back of slavery. America looks so great today. Why? Because it's built on the back of slavery. All these places which you see is great is because it's built on the back of slavery. Egypt was great at one stage. Why? Because it was built on the back of slavery. The Greek Empire was great. Why? Because it's built on the back of slavery. If you look up them buildings in Greece, who built those buildings? Slaves, man. All them nice buildings you see in Greece with all the marble and the architect and everything, those were all built by slaves, man. If you look at the Colosseum in Italy, that was built with what? When they destroyed the temple and stole the gold, they sold that gold and used that money to build the Colosseum in Rome, man. If you think I'm lying, go do the research, man. When they sacked the temple in Jerusalem and stole all the gold and what was in there, they then built their Colosseum at Rome. They built it at Rome, and it's in a decaying state now. But obviously, they used that money to build it, man. Go ahead.
Thus, Jamaica, at first a mere consolation prize for the Western design, became the richest possession of the British in the New World, a status she owned to her slaves. This is what Boche reminds his contemporaries of in Candid London, 1759. Two characters came across a mutilated slave in Suriname.
Two characters came across a mutilated slave in Suriname. I believe they speak French in Suriname. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they speak French in Suriname. So, Lucky, go ahead.
When we work at the sugar canes and the mill snatches hold of a finger, they cut off our hand.
So now, if you worked at in the sugarcane field and your hand got caught in the mill, the slave, before taking it out, the slave master would just cut your hand off. Go ahead.
And when we attempted to run away, they cut off our leg.
And when you tried to run away, they would cut your legs off. Go ahead.
Both cases happened to me. And
this is someone speaking from experience that they had their hand cut off and their foot cut off. Go ahead. Salakia Karafi said Suriname speak Dutch. That's the one. I'm thinking of Guadalupe, Salakia. Yeah, Dutch. Salakia. I'm thinking of Guadalupe. Salakia, go ahead.
It is at this expense of ours that you eat sugar in Europe.
They said it is what?
It is at our expense, Salakia. It is at this expense of ours that you eat sugar in Europe.
It says it's at this expense of ours that you eat sugar in. Listen, everybody's getting on to me in the comments. I'm seeing Suriname speak Dutch. La other one, Suriname is Dutch, Guyana, Iran, Dutch. Listen, they're getting on to me quite as well. So lucky I made a mistake. I was thinking about Guadalupe, so lucky. Suriname speak Dutch. Listen, I'll never forget it again. So lucky. I'll never forget it again. Go ahead, quite as well.
A speech relayed by Montesquieu in the spirit of laws. Sugar would be
so now it said, now the part that we just read, it said everybody that eat, or every European that eats sugar, they're eating sugar at our expense. Listen, every time these oppressors have a cup of tea, man, they can have a cup of tea because we picked all that sugar, man.
Right.
Listen, man, the time's coming when they ain't going to be allowed to have no sugar. You know why? Because it's going to remind us of slavery.
That's right.
Life might be sweet right now, and your tea might be sweet with that sugar right now, but the day's coming when they're not going to be allowed to have sugar, man.
That's right.
Because they're drinking a nice cup of tea and eating cakes at our expense, man. Imagine this, we couldn't even eat the sugar. They're eating these things at our expense. And the time's coming where they're not going to enjoy life at our expense, man.
That's right.
The time's coming when they ain't going to enjoy life at our expense no more, man.
Right.
So, Lucky, go ahead.
A speech relayed by Montesquieu in the spirit of laws. Sugar would be too expensive if the plant producing it were not cultivated by slaves.
It says sugar what?
Sugar would be too expensive if the plant producing it were not cultivated by slaves.
Listen, man, you enjoy your sugar right now. The time's coming when you ain't gonna have it no more, man. You enjoy your cakes and your sugar and all of those things, because the time's coming when you ain't gonna have it no more, man. It says sugar would be too expensive if it wasn't cultivated by slaves, man. And it was cultivated by slaves. And you're enjoying sugar. Why? Because we had to work in them fields, man. We had to work in them fields. So, Lucky, go ahead.
Charles Boyd confesses that without their slaves, the best established colonies would be of little value.
They said without what?
Without their slaves, the best established colonies would be of little value.
It says without their slaves, the best established colonies would be of little value. So if they just had these countries but didn't have no slaves on them, all these things would be of little value. But because the slaves, they made the slaves work so hard, their colonies became of great value. It became of such great value, man, because of the beatings and the slavery and the oppression that they put on God's chosen people, man. You couldn't even run away. They would put yokes of iron on your. Give me Deuteronomy 28 and 48.
This is Deuteronomy chapter 28 and verse 48. Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which the Lord shall send against thee, in hunger and in thirst.
And now we were serving them in hunger and in thirst. So in hunger and in thirst, meaning anything you wanted, you had to go for them. You had to go to them. You wanted a good meal, you had to go to them. You wanted scraps. They would say to you, work hard and we'll give you scraps, man. They'll say, work hard and we'll give you scraps. It's Lucky, go ahead.
And in nakedness.
Hold on, wait a minute. Hold on, wait a minute. Yeah, read that.
Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies, which thou shalt send against thee, in hunger and in thirst.
And you serve them in anything, in hunger and in thirst. Go ahead.
And in nakedness.
And in nakedness. Go ahead.
And in want of all things.
And anything that you want, you have to go to the oppressor, man. You want to come to England, you have to go to him. You have to get a passport and go to him and ask him, can I come here on a work visa? And he's sitting in the interview, and you're begging him, can I come into the country? You want a job, you have to sit opposite him and beg him for the job. You have to sit there and beg him and beg him and beg him, because you have to go to them in one of all things, man. You have to beg them for everything. So, Lucky, go ahead.
And he shall put a yoke of iron.
And he shall what?
And he shall put a yoke of iron.
And he shall put a yoke of iron, man. And the Bible talks about a yoke of iron, and in history there's images of brothers with a yoke of iron on their neck, and they call it a punishment collar. Now the Bible calls it a yoke of iron, they call it a punishment collar. And then when you look up a punishment collar, it tells you that it's made from heavy iron, man, which is letting you know The people that it's talking about in the Bible is talking about us. Like, show this picture here for us all, and then read the part next to it. So that part said he shall put a yoke of iron on his neck. Show that picture on there. So lift it up just a little bit. So now, if you look at hold on, if you look at the brother here, he's got the muzzle on his mouth, so he can't eat no sugar, the iron mask, and he's got the yoke of iron on his neck, and they call that a punishment collar. So if you used to Google punishment collar, that's what they called it. The Bible calls it a yoke of iron, and they call it a punishment collar, which is made out of heavy iron, which is letting you know the same people is talking about in the Bible. You can find this in history also. So if you don't believe in the Bible, maybe you should, because this was written in the Bible way before it actually happened to you. And we're reading about this punishment collar years later when the Lord told us, yo, obey me, and you could avoid all of these things. Now read the part next to it. The part to the right of it, of the picture.
The implements of plantation slavery. This mid-18th century engraving shows a punishment collar.
Shows a what?
Shows a punishment collar.
And that's the name of it, a punishment collar. So it shows a punishment collar. Go ahead.
An iron mask.
An iron mask. They used to put the mask on you, and imagine the iron on your face must be hot, man. Imagine you working in the hot sun. You know iron gets hot, so lucky. Go ahead.
And leg shackles.
And leg shackles. They'll do most of these things so you can't run away. Go ahead.
These grim contraptions were often used to punish slaves who had escaped.
And they would use these things to punish slaves who had escaped. They would punish slaves who escaped. So like you pass this. Let me see if this. You know, for time's sake, get me Exodus chapter 5 and verse 1. Hold on, wait a minute.
Exodus chapter 5 and verse 1.
Actually, show this picture. Everyone's seen this picture, but we just have to keep showing it. This one here. Don't read the brother's back all tore up. Huh? Wait a minute. All right, so now that brother right there is back so torn up, man. Just think, in slavery, this is what would happen, man. They'd beat you like that to where you can't even lie down on your back. There's some places where they said they put salt in the wounds and stuff, or they'd beat you, rip your back like that, and then put molasses on you. So obviously, insects that like sweet things like that would then come and start to eat you alive. They'd chain you up so you couldn't move, and the insects would come and start to eat you alive, and that was their entertainment. And then we have Pastor Green saying everybody can be saved. Then we have Pastor Green saying everybody can be saved. Meanwhile, this man needed saving, man. This man here needed saving, so his back didn't have to look like that. We can drop that. Get me. Hold on. Wait a minute. Hold on, let me see what I want next. Get me, give me Exodus 5 and 1. So you'll see slavery in Egypt is the same thing that we was going through all over again, man. Just enslaved by these people and brutalized by these people.
This is Exodus chapter 5 and verse 1. And afterward, Moses and Aaron went in and told Pharaoh, "Thus saith the Lord God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness." And Pharaoh said, "Who is the Lord, that I should obey his voice to let Israel go?"
And now Pharaoh said, "Who's the Lord that I should obey his voice to let Israel go?" Pharaoh's saying, listen, what Pharaoh's saying is, I'm God. And the Egyptians used to think there was God. They used to think there was actually God. Why? Because they was in charge. And they used to feel like, I'm the authority and nobody can't tell me nothing. And the oppressor has that same spirit today. He has the spirit of, I'm God, and all things that you need to do goes through me. He has this thing of everything you want to do in life, has to go through me because I'm God and I decide what you do and what you don't do. And that's why the Lord's going to raise him up and then destroy him to show our people who worship him that this man is not God. Because some of our people think this man is untouchable and can't be harmed and can't get brought down low. Pharaoh also brought the same thing, man. Pharaoh thought the same thing. He looked at Moses and them like they was nobodies, man. Until Moses is saying to him, look, man, let the people go. This is going to happen. Pharaoh would disregard it. And then it would let you know. Obviously, the things that Moses did, they didn't do it right there and then. There's some of them, it happened after a few days. I can't remember. It's in Exodus somewhere. I'll let you know. It happened after, one of them happened after a week. Moses told him a week prior, I believe. And then the curse came like a week later. And then Pharaoh was like, yo, go find them brothers that done this. And then he begged them to take the curse away. They took it away. His heart was hardened again. Because why? That's these oppressors for you, man. Go ahead, read on.
I know not the Lord, neither will I let Israel go.
He said, I don't know the Lord, neither will I let Israel go. And why would Pharaoh let them go, man? He's making all this money. He's rich and wealthy. He's living good. I mean, why would he let them go? He needs pyramids built, man. He needs pyramids built. He needs all these things built, man. People only go, people now only talk about Egypt. Why? Because we was there, man. Because we was there and we built everything that you see there. Like when people go there, they go to see what the slaves built, man. They don't care about Pharaoh and whatnot. They go to see the pyramids. Why? Because we're great people that built all these things. We made their country great, man. The same way we made England great. The same way we made America great. The same way we made Puerto Rico and Mexico and all these places, man. We make everywhere great, man. Everywhere where we are, people want to come and look at it like it's a tourist attraction. Why? Because we make it great. Nobody don't want to go to India. Nobody cares, man. Why would anybody go to India? Nobody cares, man. Nobody don't want to go to China and Japan. How come nobody don't want to go to China and Japan? Because there's nothing great about it, man. But everywhere where we dwell in bulk becomes great, man. And everybody wants to go there. And all of those kind of things, read on. Like when have you heard somebody say, yeah, I'm going to India? You don't hear it. Other than the IUIC, so okay. Only they want to go. Only they want to go to India. Nobody else in their right mind is going to say, yeah, I want to go to India, because there's nothing there, man. But where we are in bulk, everybody wants to go. Where we've been in bulk, everybody wants to go. Why? Because they want to see the monuments. They want to see the history. And the history that they're really seeing is history that we've left there when we was there. Because we great, man. Everyone wants to follow in our tracks and all of those kind of things. So, Lucky, go ahead.
And they said, the God of the Hebrews have met with us.
The God of the Hebrews have met with us. And listen, man. The God of the Hebrews have met with us, man. The God of the Hebrews met with us in 1969, man. In 1969, when the ISUPK was formed, the God of the Hebrews met with us, man. So, Lucky, go ahead.
Let us go.
And ever since then, there's been camp speakings every week, man. And the oppressor just thinks his God and thinks he can disregard it. And his heart is hardened to what we're saying on them corners. Just think about these devils that walk past the camp. Their heart is hardened to what we're saying on these corners. Until things what that we're saying starts happening, man.
That's right.
Soon the things we're saying is already happening. And soon they're going to have to take notice, man.
That's right.
Soon they're going to have to take notice. They didn't want to take notice. You'll see that Pharaoh didn't want to take notice. So what did Pharaoh do? Called his magicians to do the same thing that Moses was doing, to prove that, oh yeah, what they're doing can be explained because look, my Egyptian magicians can do it too. He called back in today we would call it a scientist. He called this scientists, and the oppressor does it till this day. And there's certain things that science can't explain, man. Science can't explain the whole sea turning red, man. Science can't explain it. So then Pharaoh realized, he called his scientists again. And that happens today. Scientists is always trying to explain away the works of God. The same thing Pharaoh did when he called his magicians, aka scientists, trying to explain away the works of God. Great Britain try and do that same thing till this day, man. They try and explain away the works of God. And there's something science can't explain, man. Something science can't explain. So what did he have to do? He had to beg for Moses and them to come and lift the curse, man. Like science couldn't explain what? The COVID outbreak, man. It couldn't explain it. There's certain things that couldn't explain it, man. So they tried to lie and say, oh, it was made in a lab. All of those kind of things. Listen, man. They rely on science. Why? Because they hate God and they think that they're God. And then once they come against something that science can't explain, then they're going to be looking for the Hebrews and saying, yo, we heard you say something about such and such. And their heart's just going to be hardened like Pharaoh's, man. They'll listen for a bit, then their heart's going to be, once things go back to normal, their heart is hardened again. That happened to the British. One day there was fearful mass and everything. Now that COVID's gone, their heart is hardened again. Going back to the same devils they've always been. So I can read on.
Let us go. We pray thee 3 days journey into the desert and sacrifice unto the Lord our God, lest he fall upon us with pestilence or with the sword. And the king of Egypt said unto them, wherefore do ye, Moses and Aaron, let the people from their works get unto you, get you unto your burdens.
It says get you unto their burdens, man. It says get ye unto your burdens, man. Meaning go do some work. Pharaoh said, yo, these people talking about letting these slaves go, work needs to be done. And they would do the same thing back to us in slavery, man. Work needed to be done. What would they do? Punish some of the slaves so you work harder. They would punish a slave in front of you, and what would you say? Damn, I don't want that punishment. I'm going to get to picking some cotton, man. I'm going to get to cutting sugar cane. I'm going to get into doing all the things that I'm supposed to do. Go ahead.
And Pharaoh said, behold, the people of the land now are many, and you make them rest from their burdens. And Pharaoh commanded the same day the taskmasters of the people and their officers, saying, ye shall no more give the people straw to make brick.
You shall what?
Ye shall no more give the people straw to make brick.
And he said, take all the, you see how those making brick before with straw and whatever else materials those using? Take the materials away and let them find the materials themselves. Make their work harder for them. Because once you make their work too easy for them, they start talking about serving some God. I don't want to hear that. I just want work done. So Pharaoh said, you know what? Let's make their life harder. And go ahead.
As heretofore, let them go and gather straw for themselves, and the tail of the bricks,
go ahead,
which they did make heretofore, ye shall lay upon them. Ye shall not diminish aught thereof.
And he said, take the straw away, but we still want them to produce the same amount of work. And in slavery, brothers had one hand because it was cut off, because he probably got caught in the middle and the oppressor cut it off. They wanted the same amount of work produced. Brothers had 1 foot. They wanted the same amount of work produced, like you had 2 feet. They wanted to pick the same amount of cotton with 1 hand, like you had 2 hands. And they didn't want nothing diminished. So, like, you go ahead.
Could they be idle?
For what?
Could they be idle?
And they was like, these people be idle, man. They was like, listen, they're idle. They got nothing else to do but talk about they want to serve some God, give them more work to do. Go ahead.
Therefore they cried, saying, let us go and sacrifice to our God.
And now Pharaoh's mocking them, saying, look, they said, let us go sacrifice to our God. Hold on, let me see. Read on. I'm gonna see which part I want for time's sake. Go ahead.
Let there be more work, let there more work be laid upon the men, that they may labor therein, and let them not regard vain words, as the taskmasters of the people went out and their officers, and they spake unto the people,
go ahead,
saying, thus saith Pharaoh.
Jump down to verse 15.
Verse 15. Then the officers of the children of Israel came and cried unto Pharaoh, saying, wherefore dealest thou thus with thy servants?
And they came crying to Pharaoh, man. We always go crying to the oppressor. Whereas we shouldn't cry to the oppressor, man. We should cry to God, man. Because in the Bible, the Lord said their cries have reached up to heaven, man. Imagine if we cried to the Lord, our cries would reach up to heaven, man. And once our cries is reached up to heaven, the Lord saves us, man. The Lord saves us once our cries reaches up to heaven. Go ahead.
There is no straw given unto thy servants.
And now these oppressors just begin to do horribly with us. They could give us the straw, but they rather not. Like same like today, they could give us better pay, but they rather not. They could give us more hours on the job, but they rather not. They could lower the house prices, but they rather not. When it comes to us, they don't want to do nothing for us, man. They just want to make our life hard in every single way. Go ahead.
And they say to us, make brick, and behold, thy servants are beaten, but the fault is in thine own.
And they said, look, we've been beaten, man. And the fault ain't us. The problem's in your people because you didn't give us the proper equipment. Go ahead. And this is just right here is just an oppressor's answer. The next line. Go ahead.
But he said, ye are idle.
He said what?
Ye are idle.
This is an oppressor that has no mercy, man. You see these people working sun up and sun down to build your kingdom, and they don't understand. Let's just be nice to them. They're building for us, and they beat them and treat them horribly and saying you're idle. Listen, man. When you look at everything that these slaves built, they don't seem idle to me, man. When you look at Great Britain and everything which is built in Great Britain till this day, it don't seem idle to me. All that sugar. Listen, Jamaica being one of their greatest colonies, bringing in the most sugar, don't seem like the people in the Caribbean was idle to me. They should never, ever, ever be able to say someone from the Caribbean is lazy, man. Meanwhile, you sat down being lazy. These people's working, picking your sugarcane and all of those kind of things.
That's right.
And now you have the cheek to call them lazy, man.
Right.
Now you have the cheek to say they're idle and they're lazy. And listen, man, this is why the oppressor can't get saved. You know why? Because if heaven was a place in the sky, you'd be picking cotton in the sky, man.
That's right.
You'd be picking cotton in the sky and sugarcane in the sky and making them cups of tea. Listen, man, can you believe in workplaces? There's workplaces where you have to make your manager cups of tea.
Right.
There's some jobs where you have to actually make your manager a cup of tea. Do it. Listen, they have the audacity to ask, make me a cup of tea. Like them jobs. Listen. I've had exactly. Listen, I've had slaveries, but I've not had a slavery where the oppressor says, "Make me a cup of tea." Imagine you're in the kitchen making everyone's tea, man, making coffee in the kitchen for everyone. I've had slaveries, but I've never had a slavery like that, where they say to you, "It's your day to make the coffee today," and it's crazy. There's some jobs like that. It's your day to make the coffee today. That right there is insane to me. If your job's not a coffee maker, why am I in the office making coffee for everybody, man? Listen, that sounds crazy to me. It's your day. It's your turn today to make the coffee. Where's this in the contract and the agreement? My day to make the coffee. If you want a coffee, you go in the kitchen and make the coffee yourself, man. I don't drink coffee. I don't know how to make coffee. You go make your own. Listen, you go make your own coffee. There's actually jobs where you have to go in the kitchen and make someone's coffee. And that right there is crazy to me, man. You have to make someone's coffee. So what verse we at? I've had terrible jobs, but I've never had a job that bad. That sounds like the worst kind of job ever. You have to make coffee for everyone in the office. Listen, that sounds crazy to me. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. So, okay, go ahead.
Verse 17. But he said, Ye are idle, ye are idle. Therefore, ye say, let us go and do sacrifice to the Lord. Go therefore now and work, for there shall no shore be given you, yet shall ye deliver the tale of bricks.
No straw shall be given. Drop that. Give me Exodus chapter 6 and verse 9. So now, what you'll find is the people have said to Moses, why have you done this to us? And imagine, instead of them being mad at Pharaoh that actually beat them, they was mad at Moses. And we have a tendency as black people to do this, whereas people always say to us, stop saying the things you're saying because you're going to make those white people hate all us black people. Stop saying this. And then they attack us instead of the real problem. Whereas the oppressor is the problem, man.
Right.
Moses didn't beat the people. The oppressor did. But they never once checked the oppressor and said, yo, what you're doing is wrong, man. They would rather try and chastise Moses, man.
Right.
And we do this every single time. Every single time, man. What we need to realize is most black people is in a position like us anyway, and the oppressor's the problem. Once we start realizing he's the problem, it will make our life a lot easier. So let's read on.
And Moses spake so unto the children of Israel, but they hearkened.
Actually, we can drop that for time's sake. Let me get. Hold on. Get me. Hold on. Hold on. What is it that I want? Give me Ecclesiasticus 12 and 10 in the Apocrypha. Hold on. I'm trying to see what I want. So now, as you know, black people fought in World War I and World War II. So obviously they didn't want black people fighting in the war because during World War I and World War II, they didn't want black people to harm a white soldier. Even though they was at war with Germany, they didn't like the fact that a black man was harming a white man. Even though you're on the side of the British, they didn't like that. So they didn't want black people in the army. So what did they do? They left black people to work in the trenches where you would get trench foot and all of those kind of diseases. They wanted you just to work in the trench because they didn't want a black man to harm a white man in the army. Hold on. Go ahead, hold on. Yeah, go ahead. All right, give me read this. So now, actually, read what you're holding, Ecclesiasticus 12 and 10.
This is Ecclesiasticus chapter 12 and verse 10. Never trust thine enemy, for as iron, for like as iron rusteth, so is his wickedness.
Listen, like as iron rust and so is his wickedness, man. Never trust your enemy. This man will use you for what he wants, and then once he can't use you no more, he's just going to dispose of you. But get this for me. So now this is about when black men was in the army. Hold on, let me see which one I want. Go ahead.
This is page 54. Racial tensions began to emerge during the war years.
So now racial tensions began to emerge during the war years. Go ahead.
When increasingly politicized, black servicemen agitated for...
So those black servicemen in the military, go ahead.
Agitated for an end to racial discrimination.
And these black men wanted the end of racial discrimination. These black men was like, yo, we're fighting in your army. Why are you still being racist towards us? We fighting in your army. Why are you still being racist? Go ahead.
That they had suffered even as they were being maimed.
As they were being what?
Being maimed and killed.
And imagine this. You're fighting in the army. You're being maimed and killed. You're being maimed and killed by these people. And they still have the audacity to be racist towards you. Why are you being maimed and killed? Imagine you're getting maimed and killed for them. And they still have the audacity to be racist towards you. Go ahead.
In the line of duty, in December 1918, around 8,000 soldiers of the BWIR stationed in Taranto in Italy been waiting for several months to be demobilized and given a passage home.
Go ahead.
Whilst there, they learned that their white British counterparts had been awarded a pay rise.
Wait, the white British counterparts was what?
Had been awarded a pay rise.
Imagine you're in the army, man. You're fighting, you're doing the same work as white people, if not more. And you find out that they get a pay rise and you don't get a pay rise, man. After being maimed and racially abused. England's racist, man.
That's right.
There's no way you can tell me England's not racist. They gave a pay rise based on color, man. And they do these things till this day. You know, everybody knows there's some Edomite on your job that's the manager that shouldn't be the manager. There's an Edomite on the job that's not even good at their job and they're the manager and you know they shouldn't be. They get a pay rise based on color. Lucky, go ahead.
Which was denied to the BWI.
Which was what?
Which was denied.
Which was what?
Which was denied.
Listen, man, the black workers that was in the army, this pay rise was denied to black people. this pay rise, these Edomites was allowed, they got the pay rise, but this pay rise was denied to black people. How unfair is that, man? This is why you should never join their army. They don't even respect you in their own military. Go ahead.
That's right. To the BWIR on the grounds that they were natives.
See, so now they said we can't give it to you because you're not really a native. You're not really a native of England. Even though we've gave you sugar for all these years and we've came from far to fight for you. We left our own country to come and fight for you so you win the war. Go ahead.
Angry that the pay rise did not extend to them and further resentful at being ordered to wash the dirty linen and clean the toilets of British and Italian labourers.
And now they had to clean the toilets of the British people and all of that. This is what they're doing in the army, cleaning the toilets of the British and Italians and all of these people. Go ahead.
They mutinied for 3 days. The army responded by sentencing the leaders to up to 5 years.
So now the people refused to fight because they said, yo, you're not paying us. We're not going to do it no more. Go ahead.
5 years imprisonment.
Go ahead.
Though one was in prison for 21 years.
One was in prison for 21 years. One got in prison for 21 years. Go ahead.
And one was executed by firing squad.
One was executed by firing squad. That's when about 6 people sit you down. They all got guns. And one person doesn't have a bullet in their gun. And they all shoot. 5 of them will have bullets in their guns. And you don't know which gun you got. You just all shoot at the same time. And in that way, you all go home peaceful, feeling peaceful, thinking, well, maybe my gun was the one that I didn't kill that man because maybe my gun didn't have the bullet in there. I believe that's the one where there's about 6 of them. These are sharpshooters. Yeah. I believe one of the guns don't have the bullet in. They call it firing squad. Obviously, kill. I'm sure. I don't know if they still do it, but they used to kill people that way in North Korea or somewhere. Is there any more on that?
That's it.
All right, read this. Read page. We're gonna fly through these quick time. Read page 52 for me. I'm gonna try to fly through these.
Page 52. Sort of attitude, because really and truly, this country doesn't like strangers.
This country doesn't like strangers, man. Meaning, really, correction. This country doesn't like niggas, man. That's what they meant to say. This country doesn't. They're saying it in a nice way, but really, well, it is this country doesn't like niggas. Go ahead.
And they don't like foreigners. Put it that way. It's a fact of life. I can say that because I got 50 years of experience.
And this man had 50 years of experience of dealing with oppressors, man, in this racist country. Go ahead.
Of this country doesn't. This country don't like foreigners. Americans even worse.
Go ahead.
So when the war was over, they were saying to themselves, "Well, okay, lads, you've been over."
So now the oppressors that sat on the couch all day, didn't fight for their country, sat on the couch drinking beer and didn't fight for their own country. This is what they began to say to the black people that did fight for England. Go ahead.
Okay, lads.
They said to them, "Okay, lads, go ahead."
You've been over here now for 2 or 3
So
years.
white people that didn't fight for their own country, black people fought for their country and kept them safe. And these oppressors began to say to them, "Okay, lad, read on.
You won the war for us.
You won the war for us." They acknowledge that we won the war for them. Go ahead.
Go back home now.
Do what?
Go back home now.
That's how they thank you, man. That's how they thank you after you losing limbs in their wars. After the white counterparts getting a pay rise and you not getting a pay rise. This is how they deal with you. They say, "Go back home now. You okay, lads? You won the war for us." A man that didn't fight for his own country, a man that sat on the couch, eating fast food, doing nothing, watching news updates, scared for his life, while you had boots on the ground fighting for this country. After the war, they said what?
Okay, lads, you've been here. You've been over here now for 2 or 3 years. You won the war for us. Go back home.
They said, "Okay, you've been here 2 or 3 years, lads. You've won the war for us. Go back home." And that's why we read Ecclesiasticus 12 and 10, man, where it says, "Don't trust your enemy. He promised you all these things before the war. Yeah, we need your help." It turned to its colonies. England was getting whooped, man. Germany was whooping them, man. And England turned to its colonies. For time's sake, get this one cut us off for me. Let me quickly get this one. Read from 51 or the green parts. Pass that on back. So now.
Page 51. And black colonial subjects to boast your military ranks. the need for black recruits became more urgent in 1940.
The need for what?
The need for black recruits became more urgent in 1940.
The need for black recruits became more urgent in 1940. Go ahead.
After the fall of France and the loss of British troops.
After the fall of France and the loss of British troops. Go ahead.
At Dunkirk.
At Dunkirk. So this is what the battle at Dunkirk, or this is going about all the wars that they had. Go ahead.
And then the Battle of Britain. There was uneasiness about recruiting black.
Wait. There was what?
There was uneasiness about recruiting black colonials.
Listen, black man, they didn't even want you in their armies, man. They didn't want you in their armies. They didn't want you in their military. They didn't want you, man. Go ahead.
Because the feeling of nationalism had grown in the colonies
Go ahead.
in the 1930s. Yet most colonial servicemen joined up because they remained loyal to the mother country.
And listen, these oppressors didn't even want you fighting in their army, man. And you joined up. Why? Because you felt loyal to England. You being from the Caribbean, being a colony of England, you wanted to be loyal to England, and they didn't want your loyalty, man. The British people didn't want your loyalty. They didn't want your love. They only allowed you to fight in the war. Why? Because they was losing, and they needed your help. And then after you helped them, they started to say, okay, the war's over, go back home. And now they begin to deport black people left, right, and center. But I read on for time's sake.
As they have done in the past, such as when they gave support during the First World War.
And now this is World War II now. It says they gave support during the First World War. Is there anyone there?
No, that's it.
All right, go to page 68.
68. On the top, yeah?
Is it highlighted? Pass it, let me see. Let me see if this is the one. All right, so now this is about a brother 15 that lied about his age to go fight for the oppressor. Says Merchant Navy galley boy Tommy Douglas of SS Hawkins was born in Cardiff, the son of Amisa and Sarah Ann Douglas. Lying about his age, he went to sea at the age of 14. He was just 15 years old on the 27th of July, 1941, when he was killed on his second trip, the Hawkins. A British cargo ship was torpedoed in the Battle of the Atlantic and sunk en route from Glasgow to Lisbon. So now, imagine this 15-year-old boy was so patriotic and loved Britain so much that he lied to fight for England, man, because he wanted the British to love him. And did the British care about him? No, they didn't, man. This 15-year-old boy drowned at sea. He drowned at sea. And that wasn't a choice. The people that drowned in the submarine, that was a choice, man. No one told you to play a stupid game and get a stupid prize. That was a choice. Hold on, let me see if I can get one more. Let me see if I can quickly go into accounts of. Hold on, I've got it here. No, I ain't even got. You know what? It's crazy. I ain't even got the book that I needed. Hold on. Hold on, wait a minute. I don't think I got the book I wanted. All right, let's. This book here is first-hand. This book here is first-hand accounts of people that came to Britain and what they went through. Hold on. Let me see. All right, read this for me. The highlighted part. So now this is first-hand accounts of people's life in Britain. Go ahead.
This is page 122. Shirley Williams.
So this is a sister called Shirley Williams. Go ahead.
You didn't have much in your head about what's going on. You had to get on with nursing, following the rules. You just did it. If there was a derogatory remark made to, So now she's saying, being black, if there's a derogatory remark made towards you, go ahead. It had to go over your head.
Meaning you have to just deal with it. If someone called you a nigger at work, you can't complain about it. Go ahead.
You could not report it.
You can't report it. Racial abuse at work. You couldn't report it. Go ahead.
Who do you report it to?
Who do you report it to? Because the same people you're reporting it to, they're racist as well. You can't report an oppressor to an oppressor. It's not gonna go nowhere. So she's saying, yo, you just have to get on with it. This was black people's life this was black people's life after they came to England after the Windrush. There was oppressed. We thought it was coming here and new beginnings and new life. There was oppressed here too. So I could go ahead.
I heard of people that had situations where they've cried about the way they were spoken to.
And people cried about the way they were spoken to. Go ahead.
Or spoken about.
Go ahead.
And they were the ones got into trouble.
And what?
They were the ones got into trouble.
And they were the ones that got into trouble. Now imagine people cried and reported it to their manager, and they the ones that got into trouble. Because this is the oppressor's world, man. He never gets in trouble in his own world. Even though you could be right, he never gets in trouble in his own world. Give me page 118.
This is page 118. Horace Halliburton writing in Birmingham Gazette, 10th of August 1949.
This is in 1949, less than 100 years ago. Go ahead.
To put it bluntly, the coloured man is not wanted in British industry.
The what?
So lucky, the coloured man is not wanted in British industry.
Listen, they don't want black people in their workplaces, man. And this man's telling you right now. Go ahead. This is first hand. This is people's written accounts of what they experienced in Britain. So this ain't stuff that's being made up. This is their actual account of what they went through in Great Britain. Soon I'm gonna write a book of my account in Great Britain. I'm gonna write my account in Great Britain about how racist this place is. So okay, go ahead.
My compatriots, like myself, have tried many times without number to find work in Midlands.
And these black men, so we tried to find work in Midlands. There's a thing that black people don't want to work. It's a lie. You're just not giving them jobs. Of course, black people want to work, but you don't give them jobs. You say there's no jobs. They even done a study where if you got a black sounding name, you're less likely to get a job. Go ahead.
Some have got work, but not the type of employment they're qualified.
And they said a lot of people that came from the Caribbean were skilled workers. Now, once you came to England, what did they do? They tried to dumb you down and make you become a cleaner. Even though you was a skilled worker in the Caribbean, they brought you here and made you become a cleaner. Even though they promised you skilled work if you come to England, and then when you come, they didn't give you the skilled work. Go ahead.
Entitle them to. As a result, there are many coloured men in the hostel who spend their days journeying backwards and forwards to employment exchange.
See, and these men are going back and forth to job centers trying to find work because no one will give them jobs. Go ahead.
And factories for interviews.
And they're trying to get interviews, but no one's giving them. Go ahead.
You can usually find several of them sitting about waiting for work. This, of course, gives rise to the impression that the Jamaican is lazy.
See, and this gives rise to that the Jamaican is lazy. When Jamaicans ain't lazy, you're just not giving them jobs,
right? Because
of their skin color. And there's a term that people say, yo, black people are lazy. Black people work very hard, man.
Right.
The proof black people ain't lazy is look at all these kingdoms that's been built, man. And black people ain't benefited off of not one.
Right.
Is there any more on that?
Can't.
Go ahead.
And does not want to work.
And they make up black people don't want to work. Like, go ahead.
Nothing could be further from the truth.
Nothing could be further from the truth. Give me page 117. Let's get another account.
This is page 117. Yvonne Colony. I was 23 and had taught at a boarding school in Jamaica. I planned to study for a degree.
Now, this was a sister. She was 23. She taught at a boarding school in Jamaica. Go ahead.
I planned to study for a degree in education in Britain and return home.
And now she planned to study in Britain and return home. Go ahead.
Of course, I ended up staying. I was a supply teacher living in Camden, but I was assigned to teach in Greenwich. I remember somebody at the office asking, "Who are you?" I replied, "I am a supply teacher allocated to this division." They said, "Oh, but you are black." I said, "Well, obviously, yes."
And they said, "You're black." So she said she's a teacher. They said, "But you're black," making out black people can't be teachers. This is the racism that they experienced in England. People thought the Windrush was all roses and nice and sweet. Nah, it was a ton of racism that we still experience today. Go ahead.
I got the second job I applied for at Ringcroft.
Now she got the second job she applied for. Go ahead.
I was flabbergasted.
Go ahead. She was excited. She was excited. She landed the job in the UK. Go ahead.
People cut out photos of me from the newspaper.
People did what?
People cut out photos of me from the newspaper.
So they had her picture in the newspaper, and they cut her photo out of the newspaper. I wonder why. Go ahead.
And wrote to the school telling me to go back to where I came from.
Imagine this. They didn't want her teaching their kids because she was black. They cut out photos of her out of the newspaper. Go ahead.
And that I look like a monkey.
Huh? They said what?
And that I look like a monkey.
What did they say about the sister?
That I look like a monkey.
They said the sister looks like a monkey, man. This is what the oppressors was doing in England less than 100 years ago, man. This sister came from the Caribbean to get a job and work hard. She was a skilled worker, and they cut her picture out of the paper because she was black, and they told her she looks like a monkey. This is how they treat us, man. And this is why I don't understand how we love them so much, man. How you can't love somebody like this, man. Somebody like this doesn't deserve your love. You're giving love to someone that doesn't deserve your love, man. Whereas the people who do deserve your love, your brothers and sisters, you hate them, man. Read on that. Anyone on that?
Somebody even threatened to burn down the school.
See, and these oppressors didn't want this black woman working in the school, that they threatened to burn down the school because they didn't want a black person working there. If you don't want black people working in your school, why don't you get off the couch and go get a degree then and go teach your own kids? Right. And furthermore, this is why we need to set up our own black schools, man. That's right. But guess what? They won't let us do that. And it's crazy because today I drove past the school and it's a Sikh school. All you seen was a ton of top nuts. All you seen was 1,000 top nuts. And it hurt my heart to see black people don't have their own schools, but all these other nations do. That's the one I'm talking about. The one by Liz House. Yeah. That's the one I'm talking about. I drove past it today and it's in thousands of them kids. And it hurt my heart. Like, how come we can't have our own schools? And then remembered that the oppressor is the devil the Bible speaks of, and he would only burn it down. That's right. He would only burn it down and not give us the planning permission. And with that brings us to the end of the class. Clap it up. We'll be here tomorrow with the security announcements and we out of here. So go ahead.
This is the ISUPK security announcements. Where the ISUPK started at 1 West, 125th Street, Harlem, New York. Rule for new brother and sister. When a new brother or sister comes into the school, they are off limits for 6 months. They're here, they're to be saluted only. They are here to share themselves of the world. If they need transportation, the teacher will arrange it. After 6 months, if a brother or sister has an interest in a particular person, he or she must get permission from the head to speak to a brother or sister. There is another 6 months in which the brother and sister will court each other. After this 6 months period, the brother and sister will get permission from the head to marry. Tithes, which is a commandment. Numbers chapter 18 verse 21. Malachi chapter 3 verses 8 to 10 means 10th in Hebrew. Ma'ashara, 10% of every penny of any increase the Lord gives you. Give to treasury department or teacher. Priest one, free will offering for priest, not mandatory. Whatsoever amount you would like. Upcoming holy convocations.
Got the Feast of Tabernacles coming up.
All Akim and Akko for to check the bulletin board in the hallway. If anyone wants to be a trooper in the school, start wearing all black boots, shirt, pants, headband, and scarf. That we say a Madiam. Madiam Shabbat. Madiam Barak. Yahweh Hashem Yah Shabbat
Yahweh Hashem Yah Shabbat
Yah class dismissed.
All right, Shalom Israel.